She said, "Don't bring up marriage again. I don't want people thinking I'm settling." She laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever said. I said, "Say no more." She stopped laughing when she found my dating profile the next week. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. The words didn't make sense at first. They just hung in the air between us, over the flickering candle and our half-eaten plates of pasta, like a bad punchline waiting for a setup that never came. Don't bring up marriage again. I don't want people thinking I'm settling. It was the laugh that followed that drilled them into my skull. It wasn't a gentle, nervous laugh. It was a sharp, condescending cackle that turned a few heads at the nearby tables. She laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever said. My name is Alex. Her name is Qley. We were at Il Ponte, a nice Italian place she'd been wanting to try for months. I'd made the reservation a week in advance. The soft lighting glinted off her wine glass and the silver bracelet I'd bought her for her last birthday. I thought the mood was perfect. Romantic. I'd been working up the courage all night to suggest we finally start looking at rings. My fork, laden with fettuccine, froze halfway to my mouth. I slowly set it down. What? Qley took a sip of her Pinot Noir, her smile still lingering as if she'd just shared a hilarious inside joke. You heard me. All that future talk. It's so final. So official. My brain scrambled to catch up. This had to be a misunderstanding. A poorly timed joke. I was just talking about our future. Our real future. Together. I kept my voice low, hoping to pull her back from whatever cliff she was dancing on. You know, building a life. A family. She let out an exasperated sigh, the kind you reserve for a child asking for the 5th time if you're there yet. Ugh, Alex. Not this again. Our life is fine. It's great. Why do we have to put a label on it? Why does everything have to be so permanent? A cold knot began to tighten in my stomach. This wasn't a joke. The look in her eyes was one of genuine annoyance, bordering on contempt. Because I love you, I said, the words feeling weak and stupid suddenly. I thought you felt the same. Don't you want that? With me? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow more cruel than if she'd shouted. Look, you're a great guy. You're comfortable. You're stable. But marriage? She leaned back again, that devastating laugh bubbling up once more. I don't want people thinking I'm settling. She shook her head, her eyes sparkling with amusement at the sheer absurdity of the idea. God, can you imagine? My friends would never let me hear the end of it. Settling. The word landed like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs. It wasn't just that she didn't want to get married. It was that the idea of being permanently tied to me was a social liability, a mark of lowered standards. I was the before picture in the story of her life, the guy you dated while you waited for something better to come along. I looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman I'd loved for 4 years. The woman I'd nursed through the flu, celebrated promotions with, whose family I'd spent countless holidays with. I saw the perfect arch of her eyebrow, the way her lipstick was flawlessly applied, and the absolute, unshakable certainty in her eyes that she was right. The noise of the restaurant, the clinking glasses, the murmur of conversations, the soft jazz, faded into a dull roar. All I could hear was the echo of that laugh and the final, sickening click as everything I thought we were shattered into a million unrecognizable pieces. I didn't say a word. I didn't argue. What was there to say? Please, don't think of me as the man you settled for. The humiliation was too complete, too profound. I caught the eye of our waiter and made a subtle scribbling motion in the air. He nodded. What? Qley said, her smile finally fading as she registered my silence. You're not going to be weird about this, are you? I just looked at her, my face a placid mask. Inside, a strange calm was descending, a glacial front moving in to freeze the chaos. The waiter brought the check. I pulled out my wallet, placed my credit card inside the leather folio without even looking at the total, and handed it back. Alex, seriously, talk to me. I stood up, pushing my chair back. The legs scraped against the terracotta tiles with a sound that felt final. Where are you going? She asked, her voice now laced with a sliver of confusion and the first hint of alarm. I finally met her gaze. My voice was flat, devoid of all the emotion that had been swirling inside me just minutes before. It was the tone you'd use with a stranger who'd bumped into you on the street. Say no more, I said. I understand everything perfectly now. And I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving her sitting there alone at the table, the candles still flickering between us, her words hanging in the air, no longer a joke, but a monument to our end. The drive home was a study in silence. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the soft whisper of the tires on asphalt. Qley sat rigid in the passenger seat, arms crossed, staring out her window at the blur of streetlights. I could feel the anger radiating off her in waves, a sharp, prickly heat against the cold numbness that had settled inside me. Settling. The word played on a loop in my head, but the sting was gone. It had been cauterized by the sheer, blinding clarity of her statement. There was no ambiguity left to agonize over, no hidden meaning to decipher. The truth was as stark and unappealing as a surgical lamp. She finally broke the silence as I pulled into our parking spot. Are you really going to be like this? Sulking because I was honest. I turned off the engine. The sudden quiet was absolute. I looked at her, really seeing the entitlement etched into the set of her jaw. This wasn't a woman who thought she'd hurt her partner. This was a woman who was annoyed that her partner was inconveniently upset by her honesty. I'm not sulking, I said, my voice even. It was the truth. Then what do you call this? The silent treatment? Very mature, Alex. I didn't answer. I got out of the car and walked towards our apartment building. I heard her car door slam with unnecessary force behind me. Inside, the familiar space felt alien. The couch we'd picked out together, the prints we'd hung on the walls, the throw blanket her mother had knitted. It all looked like a stage set for a play that had just ended. I was just waiting for the curtain to fall. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. I hadn't slept so much as I drifted in a state of numb suspension. Qley was still asleep, her back to me. I got up, showered, and dressed for work with a robotic efficiency. She stirred as I was tying my shoes. Rolling over, she squinted at me in the morning light. Her voice was groggy, laced with a practiced nonchalance. Are you going to be a baby about this all day? I stood up and looked at her. There was no anger in me, no sadness, just a vast, empty plain of certainty. No, I said, my tone flat and final. Say no more. I understand everything perfectly now. I walked out of the bedroom, grabbed my keys and laptop bag, and left. I didn't kiss her goodbye. I didn't look back. I went to work, but I was a ghost. I attended meetings, replied to emails, but my mind was in a different place entirely. It was building a blueprint for escape. During my lunch break, I didn't eat. I called Ben, my oldest friend. Hey man, what's up? He answered, his voice cheerful. I need a favor, I said, cutting straight to the point. Can I crash on your couch for a bit? The cheer vanished from his voice. What happened? Qley finally said the quiet part out loud. Last night, she told me she doesn't want to get married because she doesn't want people to think she's settling. I relayed the story in the same calm, factual tone I'd used all morning. There was no tremor in my voice, no plea for sympathy. I was just stating facts. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then, a low whistle. Holy shit, Alex. I'm so sorry. What a fucking thing to say. It's fine, I said, and I meant it. It's better to know. Can I come over tonight? Of course. The couch is yours for as long as you need. Do you want me to come help you get your stuff? No, I'll handle it. Thanks, Ben. That evening, I told Qley I was working late. It was the first and only lie I told during the entire process. Instead, I went to Ben's apartment. He clapped me on the shoulder, handed me a beer, and didn't ask any more questions. His quiet support was an anchor in the surreal stillness of my new reality. Sitting on his couch, I opened my laptop. The idea didn't feel like revenge. It felt like a necessity, like taking a first breath after being underwater for too long. I opened a browser and went to Tinder. I created a profile. The act felt methodical, like filling out a job application for the position of single man. I chose a recent photo from a hiking trip with Ben. I was smiling, squinting against the sun, looking genuinely happy. I didn't use a pretentious bio. I didn't try to sell some exaggerated version of myself. I wrote plainly, easygoing guy who enjoys a good hike, terrible movies, and great coffee. Looking to meet new people and see where things go. It was all true. It was me, without the filter of Qley's judgment. It was the man she thought was merely comfortable. Hitting the complete profile button felt less like an act of defiance and more like an act of reclamation. I was taking my identity back. Over the next 3 days, I became a ghost in my own home. I moved with a quiet purpose when Qley was at work or out with her friends. I took my important documents, my laptop, my favorite books, the watch my father had given me, and about 2/3 of my clothes. I didn't take the furniture we'd bought together. I didn't take the TV or the kitchenware. Those were relics of a life I was no longer living. On the 4th day, I took the last box of my belongings. I stood for a moment in the living room, now feeling hollow and empty despite all the familiar objects still in place. I placed my key to the apartment on the kitchen counter, right next to the fruit bowl she loved. My phone buzzed in my pocket an hour later, just as I was unpacking a box at Ben's. I pulled it out. It was a notification from Tinder, a match. I felt a faint, foreign flicker of something that wasn't pain. It was possibility. Then, a second later, a text message flashed on my screen from Qley. The tone was pure, unadulterated shock. "Qley, what the hell is this? Is this a joke? You're on Tinder." I read the message. I saw the words, felt the fury and disbelief radiating from them. And I felt nothing. No guilt. No satisfaction. Just the quiet hum of the new life I was already building. I didn't block her. I didn't reply. I simply put my phone back in my pocket, the screen still lit with her outrage, and continued unpacking. The silence, I was learning, was the most powerful thing I had. The silence was my sanctuary. For the first 2 weeks, I lived in a bubble of blessed quiet at Ben's place. The texts from Qley came in sporadic, furious bursts. "Qley, day 2, I can't believe you're actually doing this. You moved out. Over one conversation? You're actually insane. Qley, day 5, my friends are right. You're a narcissist. This is a classic narcissistic discard. You were just looking for an excuse. Qley, day 8, you left your stupid hiking boots. I'm donating them. I hope you get blisters." I read every one. I didn't block her. Watching the tone shift from anger to confused probing was like watching a weather map of her unraveling. It was data. It was not my problem. Ben's couch was temporary, but it was peace. I found a small, clean one-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city and signed a 6-month lease. It was mine. The blank walls were a canvas, not a prison. I bought a bed, a desk, and a single comfortable chair. The simplicity was a balm. I didn't jump headfirst into dating. The Tinder profile was live, and I'd exchange a few messages here and there. Even went for a coffee with a nice, soft-spoken woman named Rachel who was a librarian. It wasn't a lightning bolt of romance. It was a pleasant conversation with someone who didn't know my history, who didn't look at me and see a placeholder. It was normal. It was a reminder that the world was full of people who hadn't already decided I was a compromise. I threw myself into work. Without the emotional drain of managing Qley's moods and expectations, I had a surplus of energy. I finished a project ahead of schedule, and my boss, a man of few words, stopped by my desk and said, "You've been firing on all cylinders lately, Alex." It's noticed. It was the first professional praise that had felt truly earned in years. This was my life now. It was quiet, productive, and entirely my own. The ghost of Qley's laugh was fading, replaced by the tangible satisfaction of a life built on my own terms. The first real crack in her armor came 3 weeks after I left. My phone vibrated with an incoming call. "Qley." I let it ring 4 times. Then, driven by a calm curiosity, I answered. I said nothing. "Mark?" Her voice was tight, artificially calm. "We need to talk. You can't just disappear." "I'm here," I said, my tone neutral, like a customer service agent answering a query. "You completely overreacted," she started, the reasoning attempt beginning. "What I said at the restaurant, it came out wrong. You know I love you." The words were clear. I replied, mirroring the factual tone I'd used that night. The laugh was clearer. I heard her sharp intake of breath. "So you're just going to throw away 4 years because of one sentence? You're that fragile? That you can't handle a little honesty?" It wasn't a sentence, I said, the truth of it crystallizing as I spoke. It was a truth I needed to hear. "Thank you for that." I ended the call. No drama. Just a click. I imagined her staring at her phone, the first cold trickle of realization that her words had consequences that her tears couldn't wash away. The next phase was pleading. It came a week later, in a voicemail. Her voice was thick with tears, the artifice gone. "Please, Mark. It's a mess here without you. I can't sleep. I was stupid and scared, okay? I was scared. I do want to marry you. I was just afraid of what people would think. That's my own issue, not yours. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Please, just call me back. Please. I listened to it once. The best thing that ever happened to her, but not good enough to proudly claim. The hypocrisy was almost poetic. I deleted the voicemail. The sound of her crying, which would have shattered the old me, now felt like rain on a window pane, a distant weather event I was safely insulated from. The final stage was anger. The true colors, unveiled when manipulation and pity failed. The text started on a Friday night. Qley, 9:14 p.m. My friends are saying you must have been cheating on me. Is that it? Were you just looking for an excuse to monkey branch to someone else? Was that librarian whore from your profile waiting in the wings? I didn't respond. The accusation was so transparent, so desperate, it was almost funny. Qley, 9:47 p.m. You're really going to ghost me like this? After everything? After 4 years? You're a coward. A spineless coward who can't even have a real conversation. The silence from my end was a vacuum she was desperately trying to fill with noise. Any noise. Qley, 10:23 p.m. Fine. If I don't hear from you by tonight, we're done forever. Do you understand? Done. Don't ever call me again. Don't show up at my door. We are over. I read the last message, a faint, dry smile touching my lips. She was trying to break up with me. She was holding a funeral for a relationship whose corpse I had already buried and walked away from weeks ago. The power had so completely reversed that she was now screaming into the void, trying to claim ownership of an ending I had already written. I put my phone on silent, picked up the book I was reading, and spent the rest of the evening in the deep, satisfying peace of my own company. The unraveling was her problem now. My life was just beginning. 3 months to the day after I walked out of Il Ponte, I found myself standing at the edge of Tom and Sierra's backyard, a cold beer in my hand, listening to the familiar buzz of a summer barbecue. I'd almost declined the invitation, but Tom was a good friend, and hiding felt too much like I was still running from something. I wasn't. I was just living. I'd spent the morning at my new workshop, sanding down a live-edge walnut slab for a desk I was building on commission. The scent of sawdust and linseed oil still felt more like home than the apartment I'd shared with Qley ever had. I'd thrown on a clean t-shirt and jeans, and as I caught my reflection in the glass of a patio door, I barely recognized the man looking back. He looked relaxed. The tension that had lived permanently in my shoulders for the last year of our relationship was gone. My skin was tanned from weekend hikes, and my eyes held a calm clarity that had been missing for a long time. And then I saw her. Qley was standing near the food table, holding a plastic cup of wine. She was talking to Sierra, but her body was angled, her eyes scanning the crowd. She looked thin, almost brittle. Her smile was too wide, too forced, and it didn't reach her eyes. She looked like she was playing a part, and it was exhausting her. Our eyes met across the lawn. Hers widened in a flash of shock, then darted away, then back again, a frantic, hungry look in them. I gave a small, polite nod, the kind you'd give a casual acquaintance, and turned back to my conversation with Ben. I felt her gaze burning into my back. For the next hour, I mingled. I laughed at Tom's bad jokes. I talked sports. I listened to Sierra's plans for her garden. I was present. I was fine. And the entire time, I could feel Qley's orbit pulling tighter, a disintegrating satellite drawn to a planet whose gravity it no longer recognized. She finally cornered me when I went to grab another beer from the cooler on the far side of the deck, away from the main crowd. The scent of her perfume, the one I'd bought for her last birthday, hit me like a ghost from a past life. Alex. I turned. Up close, the strain was even more apparent. Fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. A tightness to her mouth. Qley. I acknowledged, popping the cap off my bottle. You look good, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Thanks. You too. It was a social nicety, empty and automatic. She took a shaky breath, plunging in. I meant what I said in my messages. I was an idiot. A complete and total idiot. I've been miserable. I took a sip of my beer. The condensation felt cool against my fingers. I'm sorry to hear that. The words were correct, but they were devoid of any emotional investment. I was sorry in the way you're sorry to hear about a traffic jam you're not stuck in. Her face crumpled a little at my tone. It's been a nightmare. Everything fell apart. After you left, She trailed off, expecting me to pick up the thread, to ask for details, to offer the comfort she'd always taken for granted. I just waited. I do want to marry you, she blurted out, the words desperate and hollow. I was just scared of what people would think. It was my own issue, not yours. You have to believe me. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. There it was, the full circle moment. The script she'd written in her voicemail, now delivered in person. But the audience had changed. I looked at her, this woman who had once held my entire heart in her hands and had laughed while letting it slip through her fingers. I felt a distant pang, not of love or even of anger, but of pity for the person she had chosen to become. It's funny, you know, I said, my voice calm and conversational. That night, you were so worried about settling. It made me realize I was settling too. She blinked, confused. What? I was settling for someone who saw my love as a compromise. For someone who valued her friend's opinions more than my commitment. I was settling for a life where I had to make myself smaller so she wouldn't feel embarrassed. And I decided I wouldn't do that anymore. The color drained from her face. This wasn't the reaction she'd prepared for. She had expected anger or forgiveness, not this philosophical dismantling of our entire relationship. Her eyes darted around, searching for a weapon, and landed on a woman across the deck who had smiled at me earlier. So what? You're dating now, she sneered, her voice regaining a shred of its old venom. That girl you were talking to? She's just a rebound. You don't just get over 4 years in 3 months. I followed her gaze. It was Lena, a graphic designer I'd met through a work connection. We'd had a few dates. They were easy, fun. She was passionate about her work, fiercely independent, and she looked at me like I was a fascinating novel, not a well-worn paperback she was afraid of being seen with. I looked back at Qley, a faint, genuine smile touching my lips. Actually, I'm not dating anyone seriously. I'm just happy. The word landed between us with the weight of a final judgment. I'm building a life, I continued, where I don't have to worry about my partner being embarrassed of me. It's very peaceful. I took a final, long swallow of my beer, setting the empty bottle on the railing. The conversation was over. I hope you find what you're looking for, Qley. I really do. But we're done here. As I turned to walk away, Lena glanced over and saw me. She smiled and raised her bottle in a subtle cheers. I started walking toward her, leaving Qley standing alone by the cooler. I was halfway across the deck when I heard Qley's voice one last time, a broken, defeated whisper that was meant to be a shout. You were my safe bet. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking toward the easy smile and the quiet conversation, the sound of the party fading into a meaningless hum behind me. The weight I'd been carrying for years was gone. She wasn't the villain in my story anymore. She was just a footnote, a painful lesson that taught me my own worth. And for that, I suppose, I owed her a thank you. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.